And what we need to do is we need to understand the failures, because really there is no such thing as failure. It's actually feedback, and it's what we do with that feedback that determines are we going to be successful. We can ignore it and just try again, but that's a definition of madness. If you keep doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different outcome, then you are flirting with insanity. We can just look at the failure and think it's too hard and quit, or we can adapt our approach, as I say, learn from it, try something different, and then come back. And that's what FAST is. It's about a lot of the things that I've learned from failures throughout my career, and also from studying failure. And what you find when I look at failure is actually there are only really two reasons why we fail. And the two reasons why we fail, and I'm a mathematician and I like to keep things very, very simple. I do a lot of the analysis, but I like to make things simple so I can communicate it and people can share it. And there are only two reasons why things fail. And these are because we are doing the wrong job or we are doing a poor job. And when I look at the majority of projects that I get brought into, like the one I'm doing now, the reason it's failing, there was a lot of criticism of the team involved, but it wasn't about the team. It was about the goal and the work that they were doing. They were focused on the wrong things. And when you're doing the wrong job, it doesn't matter how well you do the wrong job. You are going to be unsuccessful. And there are two causes of doing the wrong job, and these are a lack of focus. We don't know what our goal is. We don't have clarity around that. We're not sure what success looks like. Or it's a lack of accountability. We don't know who's involved, or we haven't set them up to be successful. We haven't communicated what we expect for them. We haven't given them the tools that they need in order to do the job. And when we have that lack of focus and accountability, that impacts our effectiveness. And then the things that cause us to do a poor job is that we've overcomplicated it. And just listening to Patrick's talk, it's pretty clear that the shutdown of a nuclear plant is complex. And I work in IT and there's a lot of complexity there. But we tend to make it even more complicated than it needs to be. And when things become too complicated and people can't understand, they lose interest, they lose motivation, they become disengaged, they just go through the steps, and then we lose our efficiency. And then the last part that causes us to do a poor job is that lack of transparency. We don't know what's involved. We don't know fully what we need to do in order to deliver the work. For example, the involvement of the French unions in a project. If you haven't included that in your analysis, you're going to end up finding that right from the start, your project is going to be delayed and not successful. On a lot of projects, people tell me, oh, it failed at the end. But actually, they failed right at the start because we didn't know what was involved. And we set off on a project where we've got zero chance of succeeding. And what I want to do is I want to share now the things that I've learned about focus, accountability, simplicity, transparency, what they are, why they're important, what happens when we lose it, how we can fix it so that when we start a project, we've put ourselves in the best position to be successful. So any questions with that? Okay, and I'm going to ask a few questions as we go through. And one of the things to remember about failure is that the majority of things fail for pretty stupid reasons. Okay, so I'm going to start with focus. Focus is about the what. What's our goal? What's our objective? Are we crystal clear what success looks like? Because if we don't get the focus right, we can end up doing the wrong task. And as I said, it doesn't matter how well you do the wrong task, you're going to be unsuccessful. And the reasons why we lose our focus is because we don't have clarity around the goals. It can be because we've got a job and we just got to dive in and just start working on it immediately because we're all under a lot of pressure. As Patrick said, it would be nice if we all had big fat budgets, but the budgets are getting compressed all the time, resources are reduced all the time, and we're constantly asked to do more with less. And we can end up just diving in and thinking, right, we've got to get this started. But when we do that, if we haven't clearly understood what we're trying to do, then we can put ourselves in a position where we're doing the wrong job and we're setting ourselves up for failure. Einstein says if he had an hour to save the world, he would spend 55 minutes understanding the problem, 5 minutes solving it. We spend 30 seconds understanding the problem and then that 59 minutes trying to fix it. So we need to make sure we take that step back, understand clearly what the problem is, give people a clear briefing and let them get on with it. Another reason why we lose the focus is because we have too many priorities. And when everything's a priority, nothing is a priority. So we need to make sure that we keep our priorities to a minimum. On the last big project I worked with a company called Henkel. My boss said to me, Gordon, these are your 6 number 1 priorities.
For the moment.
Thank you. Yeah, and that's right. And that was day 1. You know that's going to go. But when you've got 6 number 1 priorities, if I can only do one thing right now, I've got a 5 in 6 chance of getting it wrong. And when I get it wrong, I'm focused on the wrong thing. It doesn't matter how well I do that. So we need to keep our priorities to a minimum. And Patrick mentioned bonuses. How many people use bonuses? 1 or 2? Okay. So when I worked for one company, I asked them, what are your goals and objectives? And they said, we're absolutely crystal clear. Our goals are A, B, and C. I was like, brilliant. They are really, really clear. Do you offer bonuses? And they said, yeah, we bonus people for X, Y, and Z. Okay. Now, when push comes to shove and people don't have much time, what do you think they're going to focus on? X, Y, and Z, yeah. So you need to make sure that if you're using bonuses, that they are absolutely crystal clear, aligned with the targets. And again, another thing that Patrick said was he didn't like KPIs. I disagree with that. I love KPIs, but I also agree that when management are asking me for the wrong thing, why should I bother producing that? I'm in charge of the project. I know what success looks like. I know what progress looks like. And we have to communicate to them that these are the KPIs you need to see. Me giving you a red, green, or amber traffic light tells you nothing. It might just tell you that I've said it's green because I don't want an ass kicking by telling you the truth. Yeah, and the number of projects, I mean, I've managed portfolios of projects, 250 projects, and I would look and it would see green, and you go, green, okay, let's just read through this, and then the project manager's face would drain, because as you started to read through it, it's like, where did this green come from? And do you know where it comes from? The palette selection in PowerPoint. It's just one of the options. I went with green. It bore no reality. And when it bears no reality to your actual performance, as a project manager, you're actually stopping me from doing my job because now I can't help you. You're telling me everything's going great. And without that transparency into performance, I can't help you fix it. So now I just want to give you a quick example of what can happen when we lose our focus. Does anybody, I know we have a couple of French people in the room. Does anybody know this failure? Yeah, France spent 15 billion building trains, and they wanted the trains to be faster, better, more efficient. The first three, I think they ordered 2,000 trains. First 350 trains were delivered ahead of schedule, under budget. Yes, brilliant. Just one small problem. Anybody know what that problem was?
The velocity, right?
The velocity. Is that a good answer? Clearly wrong.
No, I think it was a distance from the wall.
Correct. It was they made the trains too wide.
Yes.
They made the trains too wide. The trains were too wide to pass through 1,800 of 2,300 stations. So beautiful trains, under budget, perfect, quick, comfortable, luxurious, too wide, so not fit for purpose. And this was a 150 million problem. Now, out of a $15 billion euro budget, 150 million is going to be well within contingency. But it's not about the contingency, it's about the impact on the company's reputation, your customers, and also yourself as a project manager. This is going to take them 2 years to go through and make the stations wider. You can't just sand them down.
Even if the velocity is correct, they're going to be late.
Absolutely. Well, he could walk down the platform, though, to help him a little bit. And also as well, you know, it's embarrassing for the company and also the country. I mean, when we heard about this in England, we did laugh just a little bit. And the newspapers were full of cartoons. There was one in, I think it was Le Monde, and it just said, will passengers on platform 1 please breathe in? Your train is trying to pass. And then can you imagine going to meet the president and trying to explain to him what you've done? I'm not somebody who's lost for words, but I don't know how to start that conversation. Sit down, you'll laugh when I tell you what we've done. There's no real comeback from that kind of failure. So we need to make sure we're crystal clear about what our goals and our successes are. And there are 3 things that we can do to do that. As I said, we need to be clear about what the goal is and what does success look like. Project I'm working on, it's a shutdown of infrastructure. And when I joined the project, I asked them what did success look like, and they said we have 150 servers for the last client that we need to move to another platform. And I said, okay. When we finished the last one, we've been successful. And they said yes. And I said, but isn't the goal to dismantle the old infrastructure? And they said, well, we don't do that. That's done by Japan. And I said, well, our goal, what success looks like then is that they are capable the day after we've done our work to start dismantling that infrastructure. And when I said that, they said, yeah, but what about all the other things on there we'd need to move? I was like, so the scope is actually bigger than we actually think. And they said, well, it is now, but that's the project. Our goal was to complete it so we could dismantle the infrastructure, not just move the servers off. That was akin to building the trains. It wasn't the same as getting them through the stations. I like to keep goals to a minimum on a project, ideally no more than 3, because when you've got a big project, and you know, for Patrick's shutdown, if you've got a day, you can almost go, well, with 2 goals. Probably 1 is do it by the day and 2, do it safely. When we've got big goals, they break down into small sub-goals. And if we have too many big goals, they will break down into a lot of small goals. Now there's too many goals, and when everything's a priority, nothing is a priority. And we need to be, just going back to what Patrick said about being clear about what success looks like, you know, very clear about, don't be focused on doing it in budget. That's not a success criterion, and it's important to know that, because if you do focus on budget, you might be successful with hitting the budget target, but you might have missed some other components out. So we need to be clear about that. And then we need to communicate the goals clearly and simply and frequently. Everybody needs to know where we're going, because there'll come a point where they might need to make a decision. And if they don't understand crystal clear what our goals are, they might make the wrong decision, they're doing the wrong thing, and again, doesn't matter how well they do it, we're going to fail. Okay, so focus is about making sure that everybody is pulling in the same direction and the right direction. And as leaders, that's our job. Peter Drucker says, management is about doing things right, leadership is about doing the right things. So we are the ones that have got to take that step back and make sure we are crystal clear about what the goal and objective is. So the next part of FAST is about accountability. And accountability is about the who. Who is doing the work? And have we communicated to everybody involved what they need to do? Have we told them what their expectations are? And do we know how we are going to hold them accountable? Because if we do not hold them accountable, then we are not going to get the results or the performance improvements that we need. And one of the things I like to do with accountability, and again, Patrick did a great job of that, is show where the follow-up meetings are. You've got to have follow-up meetings. Because if you don't have follow-up meetings, what you're saying is, I want you to do this. But you know what? It's not important enough for me to come and check how well you're getting on with it. And if it's not important for me, then why should it be important for you? So we've got to have those regular follow-up meetings, and they've got to be at the right periodic moment. For me, an absolute maximum is no more than 10% of the time. So if you've got a 10-month project, it's got to be at least every month. And as Patrick says, as you start to get down to the wire, that frequency will change. So for me at the moment, my project finishes on Sunday. We had weekly meetings, we had monthly meetings, we had weekly meetings, and now we're having daily meetings because we've only got 2 days to go, and I cannot afford for something to jump up, and we've got to keep on top of it and drive it down to conclusion. And why do we lose accountability? Well, there's a number of reasons why we lose accountability, and that is that quite often people don't like to hold people accountable. It can feel a little bit threatening. You know, I want you to have this done, I'm going to be checking up on it. And when you get into that relationship, it can be a little bit difficult. And what I find the best way to hold people accountable is actually to do it from a position of support. This is my project, you're doing this part of it. Your success is my success. How can I help you be successful? And I don't care how bad it is right now. Let's start that journey together and let's figure out what we can do to move it forward. And what I found is that when you take that supportive approach, people buy into it a lot more quickly than if you take a slightly different approach. Another reason why we lose accountability is because of blame. Nothing kills accountability quicker than getting into blame. This has gone wrong, whose fault is it? When you do that, you kill people's engagement, you kill their willingness to volunteer. They just go through the motions, and it has a big impact on your operational performance. And this is an example I wanted to share with you. I read about this in a book called Strange German Ways and the Whys of the Ways, and it talked about 2 different companies, Deutsche Bahn and Lufthansa. Both of them had a problem with on-time arrivals. Deutsche Bahn fired the CEO. Clear message, you're the CEO, you're accountable. Clear message to the next man coming in, the CEO is accountable for resolving this. Lufthansa took a slightly different approach. Does anybody know who Lufthansa blamed for the late arrival of their planes? Pilots. That's a good answer, right? The passengers. Absolutely. Can you pass that back to him? Absolutely. They blamed the passengers. The CEO sent a letter to all of the passengers saying, please turn up on time, you're making our planes late. Now, the problem with blame is when you blame people, you give away the ability to fix it. Because the passengers, and it might be new passengers who've never got that letter, that are your next passengers, the passengers are never going to fix that. We've got to take ownership of the problems and say, this is mine to fix. That's not necessarily the same as taking blame, but we've got to eliminate blame from the equation and say, okay, if we're looking for something to blame me on this, I'll take ownership. Let's now get into solution mode. Because when we get into solution mode and we own it, we've got a higher probability of solving it than if we just push it to somebody else and make it their problem to fix for us. So what can we do to increase accountability? Well, we've got to have clear roles and responsibilities. We've got to let people know what our expectations are of them. We've also got to have those regular feedback meetings where we're looking to hold them accountable. We have to hold them accountable for outcomes, not following process. Now, I understand that you've probably got security processes that you need to follow. I'm not saying throw them out and let people do what they want. Those things need to be done. But we need to hold people accountable for outcomes. It's results we're looking for. And as Patrick said, on some parts of it, I don't care how you do it as long as it's done by this date. And when we give people ownership of the outcome, so when we give them responsibility and accountability for the outcome, they can take ownership of it. They can figure out what's the best way to do it. As Patrick said, you know, the projects I'm working on, we've got one master plan in Microsoft project. We must have 50, 60 spreadsheets all around the office. And I could try and band them and pull them in. It will not work. People are going to look, people know how to do their job. And it's my job to leave them to get on with it, but make sure they need to be clear when it needs to be completed by and how it fits in with everything else. There's a very simple way of holding people accountable or making people accountable, because we can't delegate accountability. People have to accept accountability. You can make me responsible, but you cannot make me accountable. That is a choice that I make. And there's a very simple question you can ask of people that actually gets them to take accountability. Does anybody know what that question is? Very simply, do you have everything you need to complete this job on time? And when they say yes, subconsciously they've accepted accountability. They've just told themselves they have everything they need. And when you ask that question, it makes any follow-up or any review a lot easier. Because if it doesn't go right and they start to get a little bit aggressive, you can say, excuse me, I asked you if you had everything you needed, and you said yes. So what's changed? And when I tell project managers that, and CEOs or whoever, one of the questions that comes back to me is, but Gordon, what happens if they say no? And I say, fix it. Because if you ask people to be accountable for a job where they don't have everything they need, you have set them up for failure, and why should they take accountability? And we've got to have this communication and dialogue with our teams. Anybody know what percentage of projects that fail, the people involved knew day one that project was going to fail? This is research by IBM. On projects that failed, what percentage of people knew the project was going to fail day one? 75%. So on 75% of projects that fail, the people knew day one it was going to fail. Now this becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, because when it starts to fail, they just go, told you. And when people are in I told you so mode, it's not going to get resolved. So we've got to have these questions. Do you have everything you need? Do you understand how we're going to be successful? Because when they say yes, they've now accepted it, and when things start to go wrong, they'll go, oh my God, it's going wrong, and they'll go into solution mode. And if they say no, it gives us an opportunity, and sometimes it's just a question of explaining it to them in a way that they can understand. They go, ah yeah, now I've got it, now I see how it works. Or, and this has happened to me at least once, the people on the project actually knew more than I did. And their concerns were pretty valid. And by having that conversation, I was able to get educated and then come up with a plan that was going to work and give them the things that they needed. So we need to make sure that we hold people accountable for outcomes, and we get them to be accountable by asking them, do you have everything you need? So, okay, thank you, best friends. And I said to them, but I've got a plan. I've downloaded the Virgin Marathon plan, and this is a 26-week plan. And week one, day one, you start by running for 15 minutes. And they said to me, okay, you could definitely run for 15 minutes. It might kill you, but you could definitely complete 15 minutes. I said, brilliant. I said, day two is 15 minutes. And they said, well, if you can do day one, you can do day two. I went, great. Day three is run for 10, walk for 5, run for 5. And they said, yeah, you could do that. And I said, then the next day I run for 15 minutes. take a day off, and on Saturday I run for 20 minutes. And they said, yep, you could do week 1. I said, great. Week 2, 20 minutes, 20 minutes, 15 minutes, 5-minute walk, 5-minute run, 15 minutes, day off, 25 minutes. And they said, is your big plan to just run 5 minutes more every week? And I said, yep. But in 26 weeks, that percentage increment becomes 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And in 26 weeks, I'll be able to run for 4.5 hours, and that will put me in a position where I can run a marathon. And they said, we'll do it with you. Because now they could see how, step by step, incrementally, we were going to be able to get to a marathon. They couldn't see how we could run 42 kilometres, but they could see 15 minutes. They could see run 10, walk 5, run 5, and then on to 20 minutes. And when people can see how it's going to be successful, that's going to get them engaged and excited. And if you've given them the tools to do the job, really excited that this is going to be achievable, and that's going to get them well and truly engaged into the project. So we need to make sure that we keep it. Sorry?
Stephen Covey always says, begin with the end in mind.
Begin with the end in mind, yeah, and then tell me how you're going to get there. I'm with Patrick, plan from the back, and then verify it going forward. So why do we lose simplicity? Well, you know, a lot of time we deal with experts, and experts just have a natural tendency to overcomplicate it. I've worked in IT, and there's areas of IT that I've been involved in that I've had no real training or expertise, things like networking. And whenever I ask them to explain it to me, they tell me, you need to be an expert in networking in order to understand this. And a lot of time I see managers go, okay, thanks for that, I'll trust you, let's move on. But I always remember what Einstein said. And Einstein said, if you can't explain it to an 8-year-old, you don't understand it. I'm not 8 years of age, so please explain it to me in simple terms so I can understand it. Explain it to me in simple terms so that I can help you do your job if we start to have problems. And experts don't like this challenge. And one of the reasons I found out is that sometimes it's because they have no clue how they were going to get the job done. And we've got to challenge them. We've got to force them to explain it to us. We've got to force them to explain it to our teams. Because as I said, if our teams can't understand it and see how we're going to be successful, that's not going to get the level of engagement and belief that we want in order to achieve the jobs. And sometimes we can think it's just too complicated. And when we get that in our mind, it can actually stop us from executing. And I remember I was 16, and my dad's boss wanted to book a holiday home in France for the first 2 weeks of August. He spoke some French, but he didn't think his French was good enough. And my dad said to him, Gordon's studying French, why don't we get him in and see whether he can help us? So I went into the office, and my dad's boss said, look, I speak some French, but I don't think it's good enough. What I need you to do is call them and ask them, can we book the first 2 weeks of August? And is there anything special that we need to know or understand? So I said, okay, yeah, I can do that. Just one thing, when you're asking 16-year-olds, ask them to explain how they're going to do it, because sometimes people will agree to things that they actually cannot do, but that's a different story. So anyway, he dials the number, and the number's ringing, and he hands me the phone, and the lady on the phone says, bonjour, and I said, bonjour, parlez-vous anglais? And she said, I am English. I said, brilliant. Could I book the first 2 weeks in August? But my dad's boss had a degree, a master's and a PhD in electrical engineering, but he overcomplicated it to the point where he didn't think he could do it. So we need to make sure that we don't get into that situation where we overcomplicate things and put people in a position where they won't execute. Does anybody know about this failure? I think this might be my favourite failure. Anybody know about this one? $5 billion failure. I think it was in 2002, something like that. The American Army decided that in order to reduce cost, one way they could do that would be to reduce the number of types of camouflage uniform down to one. So instead of having a camouflage for mountains, desert, jungle, wouldn't it be great if we had one that worked everywhere? Now, that's a very, very simple idea. Does anybody want to guess what was the flaw with this idea? Sorry?
Does not fit in all circumstances.
Absolutely. It doesn't work. You can't have something that works in jungle and in desert. And when you look at where the last two American conflicts are, Iraq and Afghanistan, and these outfits are predominantly green and grey, your troops are going to stick out like a sore thumb. So we have to be careful when we're simplifying things that we don't oversimplify it. Because simplicity and complexity, it's not linear, it's circular. Starts off very complicated, we make it easier, we make it a lot easier, we make it really easy, and now we've made it really complicated again. And one of the funny things about this is that when they finally cancelled this $5 billion fiasco, one of the reasons why they created the uniform was because the Marines had come out with a new uniform, and the Army wanted to make something that was distinctive. Now, I'm not really an English major, but distinctive and camouflage, they don't really mean the same things, do they? So here are three things that we can look to do. We've got to challenge our teams to create simple solutions. Complex solutions are very, very easy to find. And we need to make sure that just because we've found a solution, we don't just accept that. We've got to ask ourselves, is there something easier? And if we're sure that there isn't, then let's go with it. Does everybody know the story about NASA and the pen? So this is an apocryphal story, which is a complicated way of saying not true, but it's a very good learning tool, and I always share this with my teams. And this is that apparently, allegedly, during the 60s, the NASA had problems with their pens. They wouldn't write in space. So they got all of the pen experts, and they spent $1 billion, and they developed a pen that would write in zero gravity, in any temperature, upside down, whatever way you wanted. The Russians didn't have the same level of expertise, so they just continued to use pencils. So the reason I share this with my team is because I tell them I'm one of the nicest people you'll ever meet. But if I find we spent $1 billion on a pen and we could have used a pencil, I'm not going to be as nice as I was before. So we need to make sure that people are looking for the simple solutions. And one of the things that you find with experts is that if you ask a physicist for a solution, they'll give you a physics solution. If you ask a chemist, they'll give you a chemistry solution. And what we want is we actually want the best solution. So we need to get people to take that step back. If you ask an IT guy, we will tell you you need an IT system. But actually, you might just need pen and paper. So we need to make sure that we challenge our teams to keep looking for the simplest solutions. The next thing we need to do is we need to challenge everything. And if it's not needed, just rip it out. The levels of organisational bureaucracy are just crazy. And one of my favourite phrases is when I ask about something and they say, that's the way we've always done it, that tells me two things. One, that's an opportunity for improvement, and two, they have no clue why they're doing that. So we need to make sure that we challenge everything. And what I see at the moment in IT with the progression of agile methodologies and some of the cloud solutions, a lot of the things that we would have said 10 years ago you absolutely couldn't survive without, people are surviving without it. It's just that new people have come in and challenged the way we do things and have found better and more efficient ways. So we have to take that role on and challenge and see whether we can eliminate anything that is just slowing us down. And then the last part is what I call the Pareto approach, 80-20. And a lot of times people will ask, is there a way of doing this 20% faster, 10% faster? And when we do that, what we're trying to do is we're trying to make the existing process more efficient and more effective. What I like to do is tell people you've only got 20% of the time you had previously. And the reason for telling them that is because now they have to throw the old process away and they have to think about doing it in a completely new and different way. Does it work every time? No, but it works often enough that it's worth trying it, because when you throw out the old process and you start again with a blank page, you can come up often with a lot simpler solutions. So challenge things and also get people to get out of the box of thinking about just improving what they're doing, but replacing it with something much simpler. Okay, so the last part of FAST is transparency, and transparency is about truth and knowledge. It's about the knowledge of what it is we are trying to do. Do we know the scope of the work? Do we really understand everything that's involved? And one of the things that Patrick talked about is risk planning. And you have to do risk planning as part of your initial planning, because if you just assume best case scenario, you're going to end up underestimating what's involved. Anybody know who Gartner is? Gartner Research? So Gartner's an IT company and they do a lot of research, and their estimates are that projects generally cost 3 times their initial estimate. And that's because people haven't dug deeply into it, they haven't done enough planning, they haven't done enough investigation and analysis. And risk planning is a part of that. And who should you involve in risk planning? As many people as you can. Especially people that have been involved in something that failed, so they can just say, excuse me, we did this last time, don't do that. Learn from our mistakes, understand what it is we need to do. Because if we don't do the right level of due diligence at the start, we end up committing to a deadline that we will never achieve. And Patrick said we need to make sure we start at the right time. And the number of projects I see that should have started 6, 9 months ago, I've lost count of them. So we need to make sure that we do that due diligence and that we understand it, and that as project managers, we are prepared to be tough enough to stand up and say, this is how long it's going to take. You're only giving me half the resources I need, then it's going to take twice as long. Because if we don't, we're setting ourselves up for failure. The second part of transparency is about truth. It's about the truth of our performance. How are we actually progressing towards the goal? And this is where we talked about before about holding people accountable for outcomes. One of the things I like to do is I like to create progress charts that show the outcomes that we're expecting and then track against that. Plans are great. Did you do this? Did you do this? Did you do this? That's great, but really, did we get the result? When I go on a diet, you don't want to know, did I buy salad? Did I eat salad every day? You want to know, how much do you weigh now, fat boy? Let's see that number. If that number ain't going down, we're not making the progress we're expecting. So we've got to have honest, accurate assessment into our performance so that we can track. And if we don't have that, what are we holding people accountable to? We've got to have measurable targets and goals and outcomes that we're holding people accountable to. And we need to measure and have that transparency into our performance frequently. So if it's going well, we can say, good job, well done. And if it's going badly, we can say, what do we need to change to get back on track? And the plan that Patrick showed that was shared in the coffee rooms, I love those kind of things. But we've also got to update them and show the progress that's made against it. Because as people see the progress being made, if they believed we were going to be successful and they see us being successful, that engagement and excitement now turns into an even higher level of motivation, and we'll have a much stronger momentum to drive on to the end of the project. So what can happen if we don't have that transparency into performance? Anybody know where this is?
Yes. This is Athens.
Athens, yes.
I was there 2 weeks ago.
I was there 5 years and 2 weeks ago. I didn't see you. So when I did the marathon, the first marathon I ran in Dusseldorf because it's flat. And it took me 5 hours and 12 minutes to do the marathon. And when I did that marathon, people said to me, Gordon, it's not a real marathon unless you do it in under 5 hours. And I said, how many marathons have you run? And they said, none. And I said, Thank you for your input. I had one goal for that first marathon. It was to be alive 1 week later. I was very clear about that. And then I did another marathon. I did that in Cologne, and I did that in 5 hours and 7 minutes. And then I did a third marathon, and that was in Vancouver, where it rained from start to finish. I had to swim the last mile and a half, and I did that in about 5 hours and 30. And then I decided, now I've done 3, I want to do one in under 5 hours. And I'm going to do it in Athens. I'm going to do it in the home of the marathon. So I started doing the training. Then I thought, make sure you do the due diligence. And is the Athens marathon flat? No. No. Not even close. From about kilometre 10 to about kilometre 32.
21 to 32.
Yes, it's. Are you sure it was? For me, it felt like it started at 10. I'm only short, don't forget. But yeah, it's predominantly uphill, and then the last 10 kilometres, very nicely downhill, and then it's mostly down. If it's up, what goes up's got to come down, right? So I knew the terrain, and I knew when I looked at the research, on average, people run for 20 minutes longer than their average marathon. I was living in Dusseldorf, so now when I'm training, I can't train for 5 hours. I can't train against a target of 5 hours. I've got to train against a target of 4 hours 40. Because when I do that, I get the extra 20 minutes. I'm going to be within 5 hours. And I use an application called Nike Plus, and this gives me feedback every minute. This is how far you've run. This is how fast you're going. This is your average speed. So I had that feedback loop, so I know what's involved. I've got the knowledge. I've got the truth of my performance. And when I got to the top of the hill with just 10 kilometres to go, I had about an hour and 15 minutes. Now it was I saw it rained 2 weeks ago, but when we did it, it was 28 degrees, so it was quite warm. But you know, at the top of the hill, 10 kilometres to go, mostly downhill, an hour and 15 minutes, no problem. And as I started to come down, I got to about 30 minutes down the hill. I had a very serious accident. The batteries in my iPhone died. So now I have the Tiger on a continuous loop motivating me, but I've also lost the feedback that's telling me how I'm doing. And I've got 45 minutes to go, and I've basically got at this point 3 miles to go. So all I need to do is average 1 mile every 15 minutes. And up to this point, I've been averaging a mile every 11 minutes. So I'm golden. And I completed the marathon in 5 hours and 9 seconds. But that was all because I didn't have that feedback into my performance. Over that last 5 kilometres, could I have found 9 seconds? Yeah, I didn't have to high five all 1,000 people down the last kilometre and a half. I didn't need to have that second latte and donut at Starbucks at kilometre 40. But because I didn't have that visibility into performance, even though I was on track and I was actually ahead of schedule, I snatched defeat from the jaws of victory because I didn't have transparency into performance. So we've got to have that, and we've got to keep pushing and make sure that we complete our projects on time, on budget, on time, on quality, and maybe on budget if it's appropriate, in order to be successful. So 3 things that we need to do to improve our transparency. We've got to make sure we do the due diligence, make sure that we know everything that's involved, look at previous projects, do the lessons learned, do the risk planning, make sure we understand everything. That doesn't mean blow the project budget and duration beyond reason, but it does mean put ourselves within a chance of being successful and understand what's involved. And as Patrick said, something always goes wrong in the last week. And you can almost, you might not know what it is, but you could also almost plan for that and just put in a bit of contingency for that last week because something will go wrong. Then we need to create a plan of our progress. So one of the things that I like is I'm a big fan of burn down charts. So what are the key things that we're trying to do? So on the project I'm on at the moment, we've got 150 servers we have to delete from the old infrastructure. So I have a list of those and I want to know every single day, how many have we got left, how many have we got left, how many we got left. And as soon as I started building that and sharing it with senior management, they stopped asking for KPIs because they could see I knew what I was doing and they could see how I was measuring it. And because I kept it simple, they were happy to use that measurement. A lot of times, does anybody here use earned value analysis? Earned value analysis is a phenomenal technique for understanding effort, outcome, budget spent to give you an exact position of where you are on a project. The problem is you need a degree and PhD to understand it, and when you show the charts, nobody knows what it means, and they just say, could you just give me a colour? So if we can create simple charts, and if you can't create simple charts, you haven't created SMART goals. SMART goals, specific, measurable. So we create that burn down chart, that chart of measurable progress, and if we create that and share it, management will start to look at that and do it with us. And then we need to communicate the progress to our teams on a frequent basis. You were saying you send the email out every week. That's a great thing to do because we've got to let people know that the work that they are doing is being translated from effort into result, because when they can see they're being effective, that's going to motivate them and help us build momentum towards the project. So with focus and accountability, that helps us improve our effectiveness. When we increase our simplicity and transparency, that helps us increase our efficiency. And if we can increase efficiency and effectiveness, that's going to put us in a position to achieve project excellence. And project excellence is just about hitting our milestones and targets on time every single time. Now, a lot of people ask me, if I could only do one of these, which one should I do? Anybody know the answer to that one? If you could only do one of these, which one should you do? The answer is all of them. Because if you can fail because of a lack of any one of them, you've got to do all four. You've got to know the what, you've got to know the who, you've got to know the how, and you've got to know how far do we have to go and how far have we gone. Next question people ask me is, which one should I start with? And the answer to that question depends. If it's a turnaround, or if you're taking over a project that's failing, the first thing I do is I go in and I grade the project out of 5 on focus, accountability, simplicity and transparency. And then which one do I start with? That's right, one with the lowest score, simplest approach. Find out where you're weakest, fix that and improve it. Now if it's a new project, which one do you think you should start with? Focus. Because if you don't know what, how the hell do you know who, how and how far? So it all starts with focus. And what you'll find is once you start working on these and improving them, once you increase your focus, once you increase simplicity, it allows you to increase your focus. Once you increase your transparency, it allows us to increase accountability. And they start to have a multiplier effect on each other. And it's not that this is a way to do your projects fast, but it will allow you to do them faster because we're going to look to eliminate failure and try and get it right first time. And getting it right first time is the fastest path to success. So when you look at your projects, ask yourself, do I have the right focus? Do I know what the goal is? Do I know what success looks like? Have I communicated that to my teams? Do I know who's involved? Have I told them what their role and their expectation is? And do I know how I'm going to hold them accountable? Do I know how we're going to deliver the project? And can I communicate it simply so that everybody understands? And then lastly, Do I have the transparency? Have we done the due diligence? And do we have the measurement and feedback loops in place in order to track our performance? And if you can do all those 4 things, you will significantly increase the number of projects that you're successful on, but also the speed with which you deliver them. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Gordon. That was really inspirational for me. I don't know about you, everyone here. Certainly made me think about how I behave and what I do and how effective I am. So I feel a bit under the spotlight now. It was really a wonderful presentation, and thank you very much for all your insights. Questions? I've got one question. You talked about leadership and management. I know it's a kind of happening talked about, but what's your view on how you see the difference between a leader and a manager?
So for me, the one of the examples I use is the Roman legion. And with the Roman legion, you have the centurion and the optio. And the centurion stands, I think it's front left, and leads the charge. And the optio is his second in command, who has a sword and comes up behind them. And the leader's job is about setting the direction, moving them, getting them forward. And it's management's job about making sure that we're tracking, controlling, monitoring, and making sure that the jobs are done. Now, sometimes on a project that could be 2 different people. Sometimes it's the same person, and you have to be down at the front going, this way, and then run at the back and push everybody forward. So for me, management and leadership are 2 sides of, 2 different sides of the same coin. I don't see leadership as good, management as bad. They are both absolutely needed. And people that can lead and manage will be in huge demand. If you can only manage, you'll be in demand. But if you can lead as well, then you're making sure that we're doing the right things and not just what was asked for sometimes. And there's a really good tool from Bill Gates. It's called the MCCL model. Anybody know that tool? And it's about managing, coaching, clienting, and leading. And and then there's another part which is sales if you do that piece of work as well. And what we need to do is we need to look at our where we spend our time. How much time do we spend managing people? How much time do we spend coaching them? How much time do we spend clienting, which is networking with other departments, maybe speaking with the customer, maybe speaking with our boss? And then how much time do we spend leading? And most people, when they first do that test, they find that they're doing 70% managing, about 5 to 10% coaching, 5 to 10% clienting, and 5 to 10% leading. And they're stressed, it's a pain in the ass, the job. But what you find is that once you understand that and you start to now focus more onto leadership, if you can move the leadership up to 20, 30%, you actually need to do less managing. We have to do a lot of managing because we haven't put the right leadership in place. You know, as Patrick was saying, you know, he sets the goals and targets, then he leaves the team to get on with it. He's not going down and understanding their spreadsheets because you've got the right direction, you've got the right leadership. People give some of those tasks to somebody else, delegate it, find a way to lead. And if you can do that, your team will love you for it.
Then another question. You mentioned a lot about accountability. That was really excellent interpretation. Can you say some words regarding the responsibility?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So when I lived in Germany, the word for accountable was verantwortlich, and the word for responsible was verantwortlich. And if you look in the English dictionary under accountable, it says see responsible, and if you look under responsible, it says see accountable. So, so I have my own definition, and I share that with my team. And it doesn't make it right, but what it means is we have a common understanding of what accountability is. And I use football as an example. The manager is accountable for the result. Doesn't kick a ball, doesn't make a tackle, doesn't take a shot, doesn't do anything on the pitch. That's the players. They're responsible for all of that, but I'm accountable for the result. So responsibility is about who's doing it. Accountability is about who gets shot if it doesn't get done. And if you make it clear to your team that you're accountable and they're responsible, you'll get a much better reaction from them. But then you can also tell them you're accountable for shooting. So you can actually create little pockets of accountability that you want them to take within their responsibility.